What's going on? It's Juice Audio. This is a channel where I talk about mixing, recording gear, and music production. So if you're into that, subscribe down below. It really helps the channel. So these are the Kali Audio IN-8 V2s, and you get a lot more than what you pay for these speakers. At $400 each, it's pretty crazy how they managed to fit a three-way design into this price bracket. So I tested these speakers in many different rooms and many different scenarios to see where they shine best. So if you're a producer, mixing or mastering engineer, or even into hi-fi, stay tuned because I'll be talking about all these. I'll be talking about what makes these monitors so good and what sacrifices had to be made to make these. But before we start, quick disclaimer, these were sent to me from Kali Audio for review, and they asked for full transparency, so that's what you guys are gonna get. So starting with the specs, the IN-8s are a three-way design monitor with the high-end, mids, and bass all played separately by drivers that handle these frequencies the best. It's triumphed by a Class D amp with DSP crossovers. The tweeter is a 1-inch soft dome that gets 40 watts of power seated in the mid-range so that the time alignment and phase is coherent. People usually know this as a coaxial design, but Kali refers to this as a coincident design. It works great because it plays the frequencies our ears are most sensitive to and matter the most in the mix from one area. The mid-range is a 4-inch paper cone driver that basically has no surround by design. In these designs, the mid-range becomes the waveguide for the tweeter, and you don't want the waveguide of a tweeter moving in and out. So limiting his excursion tightens that up. This mid-range is crossed over at 2,800 Hz and gets 40 watts. And finally, we have the 8-inch woofer. This is a lightweight paper cone woofer with very thin surround that gets 60 watts and is crossed over at 280 Hz. So overall, these speakers play from 45 Hz to 21 kHz at plus or minus 3 dB, which on paper is very impressive. Looking at the back of the monitor, we have a lot of room tuning functionality. I love how Kali is always making the most out of their integrated DSP and give us 10 different ways to tailor this monitor to your room using these tiny dip switches. I try to stay away from Sonarworks as much as possible for obvious reasons, so having this many options at this price point is icing on the cake. As far as inputs, we have the RCA, TRS, and Balance XLR. Looking at the design of the monitor, I have nothing to complain about. They definitely went the extra mile to make sure there's no visible screws, and the blue power LED doesn't hurt my eyes to look at it. The cabinet design is thin MDF, which is expected for a huge monitor at this price point, but if you listen to the knock tests, you hear a lot of resonance. But thankfully, it in no way affected how they sounded, so that doesn't bother me at all. Usually a resonant cabinet will really inflate the low mids in monitors, and I heard none of this everywhere I put them. The port is designed so that all the air that moves in and out of the cabinet has the same pressure to prevent chuffing, and it works great. There's no audible chuffing at high volumes. The one thing I will say about the design of the monitors is that these monitors are huge. Do not let this video fool you into thinking they'll fit on your normal isoacoustic stands. Right now they're hanging off my desk just a little bit, so it's kind of hard to fit these on here. So if you noted in the title that these are the second version of the IN-8s, they've improved on a lot of things, but most importantly, they improved on the self-noise of the amps. Listening on near field, there's a very slight buzz, and I'm very picky with having a buzz in the speakers, but luckily it doesn't bother me at all. And if you have these at midfield, you won't hear anything at all. They also redesigned the woofers to play with a lot less distortion. Now with less than 1% THD, it's going to be hard to find a monitor that plays this clean in this price range. So now let's talk about what you want to hear, the sound. And I will say at $400 each, I literally have nothing negative to say about these speakers. You are not going to get a better studio monitor this accurate for $400. Now I've tried a lot of monitors, as you've seen on this channel, from very budget speakers to very expensive speakers. That being said, I kind of have to judge these as if they're in a more expensive price bracket, because honestly, that's where they belong. Let's start by saying that these speakers are flat, like dead flat. And if you're not used to hearing accurate three-ways, it's something you really got to get used to. You'll say two things. First, you'll say the mids are too forward, and second, you'll say it has no bass. And I'm assuming at this price bracket, you're going to be upgrading from a budget two-way system, like possibly Yamaha HS5s or Atom T7Vs. And on first listen, trust me, you're not going to like what you hear. You really have to get used to how a three-way sounds. But once you get used to three-ways or even these, and you go back to two-way speakers, it will literally sound like there's a hole in the clarity of your mid-range, even if both pairs of speakers measure flat in the same room. And when you hear bass on these comparing to those other monitors, you at first will think that there is no bass because it's playing with such lower distortion, it's going to be something you're not used to. And when you go back to those other monitors, it's literally going to sound like the woofer has the R-Bass plugin put on it. Even when switching back to more expensive higher end two-way monitors, like my Atom A7Xs that I've owned here for like 5-6 years, they still sound like they lack mid-range clarity. It's just that the three-way system is far more superior. Even if they're using cheaper drivers, you can still get way more clarity and separation from a three-way system. And it's not all three-way systems I've heard that really give you this benefit, but specifically it's going to be from the coax or coincident design. This by far has been my favorite design in all the monitors I've been hearing. And I don't know if Kali Audio are the first ones to bring it back and revamp it, but I know a lot of other companies are starting to take advantage of it, like the Ex Machinas I reviewed. You can click here to watch that review, or as well as the Antelope Audios that just came out. They really leave the room out of them, and you're allowed to have these close to your ears without feeling that you can hear each driver separately. It really has a uniform sound, and it's nice to listen at close by. So I tried these in 5 different rooms to really understand how they perform, and with the DSP switches on the back, I had no need to use SonarWorks, which is great because I don't really like SonarWorks. And I personally don't like midfield monitors because the farther away you go from your ears, the more the room gets involved. So being able to have a 3-way monitor this close to you and have a coherent sound that sounds like only one driver is playing is great. It allows you to listen at lower volumes and really not have the need to turn it up to feel the music. Going into detail how they sound starting with the tweeter, it's very balanced and non-fatiguing. It plays with solid detail and extension. The mids are probably the best performer on these. It gives you the sound how it is, and if something sticks out, you will know. But it's not as harsh and pokey. The mids kind of have the same texture as my mix cubes, but although they are tuned very differently, the Kalis have a similar raw sound, and it's great because I really love mix cubes. The soundstage and imaging is very, very impressive. With the time alignment of the drivers, the imaging is sharp and precise. It gives you a lifelike and natural sound within the speakers, and transients are fast and dynamics are controlled. I will say only because I've heard more expensive 3-way monitors, the transient speed on these is good enough, but comparing to other monitors that of course cost a lot more, those have faster transient speed and more dynamics. It seems after a certain price point, all you get when you pay for more monitors is faster transient speed and dynamics. But these, for the price, the dynamics are great and the transients are fast and they do play very loud and clean. The bass on these is very clear. As I said before, you will need to get used to it. It's fast and punchy but not overdone. Forcing myself to be nitpicky here, the one thing I dislike about these is that the bass rolls off a little too early. I just wish there was a little bit more extension out of these. I mean, they're a huge 8-inch woofer, so you'd expect them to put out some deep bass, but honestly they don't. The bass gives me a sealed woofer sound and it's very tight and clear, and I think they rolled it off a little early to achieve such low distortion. And I try my best not to use subwoofers because they have a load of problems if your room isn't treated good. But you might want a woofer with these to get that last few octaves if it's missed. But honestly, because I've tried these in so many different rooms, it really depends on your room. Because here in my studio and the living room I have in my house, they lacked a little bit of bass extension. But when I took these to the professional studio, they had some solid bass, and I had no need for a subwoofer over there. But for what it does play, the bass is very tight and controlled. I personally would probably end up going with the IN-5s and a subwoofer, only because these just don't fit on my desk. But you might be perfectly happy with these depending on what kind of music you work on and how your room responds to these. These are crystal clear throughout the range and they give you no hype. They just show you exactly how the music sounds. So that being said, these speakers are a tool for work. They're designed for one purpose, for working. So if you're intending to buy these for hi-fi or home theater, I would not recommend that. These are not enjoyable to listen to. And that, of course, is what you want in the studio. The translation on these is amazing. Having that mid-range driver allows you to have a magnifying glass into what is most important in your mix or in your song. And these are basically designed strictly for translation. So if you're mixing or mastering, these will serve you very well. But having extremely flat monitors might come across as abrasive when you're producing, but I would take some time to get used to these because it will actually save you time in the long run on your songs, because a song will turn out to mix itself when you're hearing what you actually meant to hear. You will end up wanting to choose sounds that complement each other instead of collide. And building the production through mic selection or sound selection is way more important than mixing the song afterwards. So overall, for $400 each, I really cannot recommend these enough. And they really implemented these drivers in such a way that they work so well together and outperform a lot more expensive monitors. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this review, comment down below. I'm always happy to reply. And I'll be reviewing the Kali sub coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. Cheers.